You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo, golazo.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Ooh-ah, Canada. Say ooh-ah, Canada. How you guys doing? We got Daniel Squizzato on the line along with Kevin Laramee as always. How you guys doing?
Great, Daniel.
I'm well. I'm just a bit worried that I've been calling you Duane Rollins for the past decade. Just, geez. But hi, Duane. Hi, Kevin.
How you doing? Yeah, the English guy there. We found him on the street, gave him $10, and he did that for us. No, not kidding. Yeah, Kevin tracked that.
Pretty much.
Yeah, we have to have. It has to be an English voice, as you know. That is the rule of a soccer podcast: is you have to be introduced by an English voice.
Only way to get credibility in North America.
Exactly.
That or French accent. One or the other. It's not that easy. It's pretty hard to do.
Wow. Who's that professional man who's talking right now? I believe everything he says. Listen to his accent.
That was a Pembroke accent. I think you just threw at me there, Kevin, but that's okay. Speaking of which, real quickly, James Sharman, he's a TV personality here. I always love this skit he did with the Tim and Sid show, which is kind of a comedy, sports, pop culture show up here in Canada. He's an English guy, James. He's does the soccer stuff like that. The skit and the joke, the punchline basically was that James was from Sudbury, and he's actually grew up in Sudbury as a big Wolves fan, and he couldn't get a job and he couldn't get a date, so he put on a fake English accent, and suddenly he's a TV reporter talking about soccer, and all the women love him. I thought that was a hilarious skit that Tim and Sid did. Funny stuff that. Anyway, Daniel, you don't have an English accent, but we still trust every word you say. So that's why we brought you on today to have a conversation about none other than the bound for glory Canadian women's national team. So let's start there and ask you, how surprised are you that they're in the semifinals?
Well, I'm glad, first of all, that people bestow some credibility upon my strange Ontario/Maritime/North Dakota accent. So thank you for that. Second, Duane, I just want to add a bit of clarity for anyone who may have been listening to what you just said now and who doesn't follow the Ontario Hockey League. When you mentioned the Wolves, the minor league hockey team, not the professional soccer team from Wolverhampton. So that's another one there. The women's national soccer team. Well, I believe I was on this show about a week ago and said something along the lines of this tournament could finish for them anywhere between squeaking out of the group stage and actually winning the gold medal. And now that we're sitting where we're sitting, with the team being 2 wins away from that aforementioned gold medal, with the USA no longer in contention in this tournament, I mean, it's if there was ever a time for the Canadian women to win a big tournament, this is it, with all due respect to the Cyprus and Algarve and various Four Nations Cups in China and Brazil and other places that they take part in. When I say big tournament, I mean the Olympics and the Women's World Cup. Germany is difficult. Anyone looking at the previous game in the group stage between Canada and Germany and expecting that that's going to be a preview of this one is probably in for a bit of a surprise. Both teams rested players in that game, players that are going to come in and have an impact in this semifinal. Both teams realize what is on the line, and that is going to affect your approach in a game like this. In the intervening period between the quarterfinal and the semifinal, a lot of the comments from head coach John Herdman and from players has been about being a tough defensive team. I mean, Christine Sinclair remarked after the quarterfinal against France that she thinks Canada is the best defensive team in the world. Whether or not that holds true, they are going to have to put in a shift against Germany, and Canada has some injury concerns to deal with as well. So I guess to come back to the question that you actually asked, which is what are their chances of winning the gold medal? Well, Duane, you're big on percentages, so let me see. 1/4. I'd say 25%.
Well, we could get into that conversation later. They're better than they've ever been. We'll say that. Look, beating Germany twice in a 2-week period is dreamland stuff for most people that have followed this for years. However, they did beat them one of those 2 times. So this isn't the same scenario as saying that off the top of the tournament for sure. And they have been very impressive in this tournament. I asked this a bit of a weird question for you, Daniel, and you'll love the comparison I'm about to throw at you here, but nonetheless, why not? I asked our listeners whether they would have rather had Sydney Leroux or Janine Beckie. Do you think that we won that trade-off of the dual nationals, or do you think maybe Sid will still have something to say down the line?
If I'm being completely honest with you, and I'm not trying to steal your thunder, this exact question was occurring to me as I was preparing my tea, getting ready to do this podcast. I was thinking, you know what? I mean, there is still this lingering resentment about Sydney Leroux, but if you look at the situation in reverse, there's as much and perhaps even more justification for Janine Beckie playing for the United States as there would be for Sydney Leroux playing for Canada. So I think that those of us embittered by, Leroux's decision to play for the States can look at what Janine Beckie has been able to do so far for Canada and say, you know what, we're even, we'll be okay. But if you're asking me at this precise moment, not like a hypothetical world, but like, if you're saying everything has gone the same way it is, so the players are the same ages as they are right now, the same circumstances. So, Sydney, Canadian Sydney Leroux still married Dom Dwyer, is still out at this exact moment with, pregnancy, or maybe she already had the kid. I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter.
I believe they've had him.
Oh, well, good for them. I would say, based on where this program is, I would say Janine Beckie. And I think that, a big reason for that is that the timing, the dovetailing of Christine Sinclair's career and Janine Beckie's career are meeting in this ideal way, in that I think that Sinclair does still have something to give to this team. Obviously, if you've seen her play, I know you have, but if folks have seen her play in this tournament and recently as well, and the way that Beckie is very gradually taking that torch. I mean, if you had the next one plopped into this program 4 years ago, I think Leroux is 25, 26, whatever the case may be. I don't want to get into the personalities angle of it too much, but would that have been as easy a transition in that locker room? And I'm not trying to cast aspersions on any of the Canadian players, but and this is probably the revisionist historian in me who's saying, well, Janine Beckie is the one who ended up playing for Canada, so of course she's the one I would want to play for Canada, and it's impossible to remove emotion from it. But at the end of the day, I think Canadians can be pleased that Janine Beckie is on board. And I think that we can finally put to rest any lingering resentment about what could have been with Sid Leroux, because she's going on and having her career with the American team. But, we got one as well.
Janine Beckie on the pitch has been impressive for a lot of reasons, for her goals, for her service, especially in the last game to that Sophie Schmidt goal. What has impressed you the most in her play, Daniel, in the entire tournament? And do you think it's her coming of age moment where she finally understands how the potential she actually has?
I think what differentiates Janine Beckie from some of the other strikers that have come up through the system in recent, well, not just recent years, like ever, is that, perhaps unlike anyone on the team other than Sinclair, she has that finishing ability. And it seems like that should be a prerequisite to be a striker, but all the three of us watch enough soccer and know that it's not. And yet, you get her in front of goal, or you get her with an opportunity to score, and she's going to make the most of it. One of the goals against Zimbabwe earlier in the tournament, there was a cross that came in from the right, and she had to turn her body and slot it in with the side of her right foot back across goal and put it into the side of the net. And that was a prototypical moment in that she made it look easy. That is not an easy goal to score. Even the goal the first goal she scored in the tournament, 20 seconds into the first game against Australia. Yeah, it's a pass right across the area and a tap in, but that's 20 seconds into your first Olympic game. I mean, yeah, you're 6 yards out from goal, but to have that composure and to make the most of that opportunity in the moment. And so, when it comes to Becky, as you said, Kevin, she's got that playmaking instinct. We've seen her play. She's got that fire in her. But what has made her successful and what is going to continue to make her successful is that she has that rare capacity to be clinical in the moment. And it's a combination of physical skill, of technical skill, and of psychological composition. And, it's not necessarily something that you can teach. I mean, Fernando Torres is still somehow employed at the top level in professional soccer, and he still hasn't learned it. So for Becky to have it all together at this point in her career is quite remarkable. And I mean, just looking back quickly to last summer's Women's World Cup, she was one of the final cuts, didn't make the roster, and that's still a sticking point for some Canadian fans because the team did have trouble finishing during that tournament. But what John Herdman has said is that he wanted her part of the Pan American team last summer, and the Pan American team was a de facto U23 side. Canada sent an under-23 team, even though it was an open-age tournament. And he wanted her there so that she could have that leadership role on that team to see what that felt like. And she succeeded at that tournament, and she's succeeding at these Olympics, and she's probably going to be the one to take that goal scoring mantle once the likes of Sinclair and Tancredi have wound things down. And so for her to get all these experiences in at a young age is only going to pay off in the years to come.
You mentioned Christine Sinclair, Daniel. Here's how I see it. You have Christine Sinclair that maybe for once it's not just Christine and Canada, but it's a team as a whole, and she's an important part, but she's a part of that team, and she knows that, and maybe that's the belief that she has, that finally I have players that I can play with at that level and go somewhere with this team, and it seems like she doesn't feel the same amount of pressure on her shoulders. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong, and I know that, barking about the American women's national team is a favorite pastime of us Canada fans, so I'm going to do it again here for a moment. I'll take you back to that game I mentioned, first game of the tournament against Australia, when Canada won a penalty kick. And it was, you would bet your house on Sinclair being the one to step up and take it, but it was actually Becky that stepped up, which caused a lot of us to kind of wonder what was going on. And I thought while watching that, Sinclair probably told her to do it. And, lo and behold, in the aftermath of the game, we found out that, Sinclair kind of either, she didn't get in Becky's way. I'll put it to you that way, that there was that sense of encouragement there. And I bring this back to the American side and in wondering, can you envision, Abby Wambach saying no, you go ahead, or Kristen Press, whoever. She's not as young as Becky, whatever. But go ahead, Crystal Dunn, take this penalty kick. I don't need to bolster my statistics. I mean, Christine Sinclair is also in the process of trying to catch Wambach for that all-time goal scoring record. So, hey, a penalty, that's a gimme. I get myself a bit closer, pad my individual stats, in addition to putting us up 2-0 in an Olympic game. But she stepped aside and let Becky take that. And I think that, we can talk about players' character as much as we like, but ultimately it comes down to what they do on the field. And I think that this is a perfectly symbolic moment of Sinclair, obviously still being a big part of this team. And I don't want it to seem like I'm just saying that in a perfunctory sense or as a nod to Sinclair's history, oh, she's still a part of this team, but really not. No, she really actually is. And Herdman talks about the potential of her playing in the next Women's World Cup 3 years from now when she'll be 36, and we all kind of look at it askew. But I mean, I wouldn't bet against it. But anyway, you look at a moment like that in that game where she steps aside for Becky, and that tells you all you need to know. The fact that she, Sinclair, that is, has stepped back into more of almost an attacking midfield role in recent years, because that's where her talents are best used at this point in her career. So I think that, I think that she is still a massive part of this team. But as you suggested, Kevin, it's no longer just the Christine Sinclair show. And as someone who has always been kind of shy and not, she let her actions speak louder than her words. I'm sure she's just fine with that.
Let's turn our attention to the next game and sort of preview it a bit in the sense of what do you think the backline is going to look like? I haven't actually heard an update on Alicia Chapman, whether or not she might be whether or not she might be ready or not. What do you think the backline is going to look like on Wednesday or Tuesday?
Well, if there's one thing we know about John Herdman at this point, 5 years into his tenure, it's that he likes surprises. And so I would not endeavor to make any kind of ironclad guess as to what that back line will look like. We know that Jose Belanger won't be part of it because, unfortunately, she picked up a yellow card suspension, so she's out of the mix. As for Alicia Chapman, she got her shoulder popped out in that last game, and they had to pop it back in. And I don't know if you kind of saw her on the bench or after that game when Canada was celebrating the win over France, but she looked pretty in a pretty bad state. She had, lost all the color in her face and essentially looked on the verge of vomiting the entire time. Herdman said after the game, I'm paraphrasing heavily, but well, it's an Olympics and, we kind of do what we have to do and we'll patch her up and run her out there if we can. So he's suggesting she might be okay. On the other hand, Neil Davidson of the Canadian press, who is, they talk about robots taking over sports reporting. Neil Davidson, I've met him in real life. He is a human, but I feel like he is part robot based on what he's able to get done. Anyway, he reported that Alicia Chapman was still in a sling during team training on Sunday. As you said, Duane, the game is on Tuesday, which means she would be in suboptimal position for that. The team does have Marie-Ève No on the alternates list. She's with the team in Brazil. 3 of the 4 alternates are. One of them is off on a beach in Puerto Rico somewhere. That's kind of weird. But anyway, but they do have a fullback with Olympic experience on that alternate list if need be. You would assume that Ashley Lawrence gets the start at left back, Rhiannon Wilkinson gets the start at right back, and Alicia Chapman is there as emergency cover. Some people have suggested that maybe you move Shalina Zadorsky, who's been a central defender, over into a right back role, which is a fullback role we saw her play at last summer's Pan American Games. So either of those options is a possibility. But like I said, Herdman loves surprises. So if he manages to, find enough duct tape to get Alicia Chapman ready to go, I'm sure he'd love to have her out there in that starting lineup. Will she be at 100%? I can't imagine so, but hey, the tournament's been all about grit and heart and determination so far. And if there's anything we know someone from Oshawa can do, it's fight through a shoulder injury. I don't know what that means. Hello, Oshawa.
What does someone from Germany have to do differently to make sure they don't lose that game they lost 2-1 against Canada in the group stage, in a game that maybe they didn't go all out 100% to make sure they had an easier quote-unquote path to the semis? What does Germany have to do differently this time to beat Canada?
Well, they have to make sure 3 of their defenders don't get head faked by Melissa Tancredi at the edge of the penalty area on the exact same play. I don't anticipate that happening in this game, mostly because I don't necessarily know whether Tancredi is going to start this game. But as you said there, Kevin, in the group stage, both of these teams knew that they were through the knockout round. And, it was a bit of a strange game because I think both teams knew that, winning that game would actually end up getting them a more difficult quarterfinal against France. So you saw, as I mentioned earlier, Canada rested Sinclair, they rested Becky, Diana Matheson didn't start. Kadisha Buchanan was suspended due to picking up yellow cards in the first 2 games. And as I suggested at the time, her second yellow card was intentional. She purposefully, tactically, strategically missed that Germany game to rest for the quarterfinal. Over on the German side, Alexandra Popp, Sarah Dabritz, who have both scored in this tournament. Neither of them started that game for Germany, although they did come on in the late going because Germany found themselves in a position where Australia was running the score up against Zimbabwe. And if Australia had beaten Zimbabwe 7-0, Germany actually would have finished third in the group, which would have been the worst for them. Australia was up 6-0 at the time. So maybe they thought, oh, okay, let's not blow this game entirely. But to answer your question, I have a way of not doing that, as you've noticed. As I said, this game is going to look a lot different because both of these teams know what's on the line. Neither of these teams has been in an Olympic final before. Canada not necessarily expected to get to a place like the Olympic final. But for Germany, this is a two-time Women's World Cup champion. Winning an Olympic gold would fit right into the tradition of winning that nation brings in the sport of soccer. And they're going to be, motivated to avenge that loss in the group stage. As you mentioned earlier, Duane, the idea of Canada beating Germany not once but twice in the same tournament is dreamland. Canada had never even gotten a draw against Germany, in 20 years, ever. Coming into this tournament. And now the idea that we might end up defeating them twice in a week is just magical. But then again, you look at the fact that, whatever the team's motivations and whatever the team's tactical approaches may have been in that group stage game, Canada managed to get a win against a Germany team with no Sinclair, with no Becky, with no Buchanan, and with those players all back in the mix. I think anyone who is assuming that Germany is going to come out and romp this game is kidding themselves, because this is a knockout game. This is a game where all you got to do is push it to extra time and then push it to penalties and then see what happens. I'm not saying Canada's playing for penalties because everyone hates them. But you don't need to go out and win by a clear goal in 90 minutes. All you need to do is sit back, absorb pressure, maybe get a goal here or there, and and hope that the soccer gods are smiling on you. So, the odds of Canada winning a gold medal are not exactly 25%. I'll leave it to Opta to break down the exact percentages, but they are a heck of a lot higher than anyone would have expected even a week ago.
For sure. I do think that the way Canada wins this game is 1-0. I can't see them winning a shootout with the Germans. I just can't. I think the key also, Daniel, is that if you look at the last couple defensive performances, they have been solid, but they've given up a penalty in the first 15 minutes against Germany, and should have in the first 10 against France. So they've got to get those starts under control. I want to turn our attention now to the rest of the bracket, and particularly Brazil. Look, the narrative here is all Canada, and that's understandable. But in the rest of the world, the rest of the women's soccer world, this has to be setting itself up for a Brazilian samba party here, is it not?
One would think so, and narratives usually are a great thing. I'm going to tread pretty carefully here in suggesting that Brazil winning this tournament would not be the worst thing. I mean, I obviously would like Canada to win this tournament, and if Brazil beats Canada in the gold medal game, I will inevitably be sad and upset in the moment. But when you look at when you look at countries like Canada and the United States that have success on the women's stage outsized compared to their success on the men's stage, there are two things that one can assume about that. One is that there's just something in the drinking water in the northern part of North America that makes our female soccer players amazingly good. Or two, that the women's game is disrespected, underfunded, and ignored in the majority of countries around the world, and that Canada and the United States have benefited from having these sort of social mores that would predicate heavy investment and heavy interest in the women's national team. I tend to believe that it's the latter. So let's move forward with that assumption. It would be a good thing for the global growth of the women's game for a South American team to prevail in the Olympics. it would be a good thing for the global game for a South American team to prevail at the Women's World Cup. And what we're looking at right now is the Olympic Games, because you hear some of the stories about the way that, in Brazil specifically, that their women's national team has gotten, the short end of the stick or been disrespected. And then, all I'm saying, and again, I'm trying to tread carefully here, is that having the Brazilian women's national team succeed on such a grand stage at home, especially, I would hope, serve to perhaps change some attitudes about the women's game, not just in Brazil, but throughout South America, throughout other parts of the Americas, which counterintuitively would actually be a bad thing for the Canadian women's national team, because I don't think I can handle a world where Honduras is also a regional power in the women's game, because me hanging on by my fingernails to the men's team playing against Honduras is bad enough. If Honduras ever beats Canada on the women's side, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. But as someone who believes in these weird ideas like, equality and women as human beings, I tend to like the idea of anything that will make the women's game and women's sports more palatable to as wide an audience as possible. So if Canada's not going to take the gold, then, as I said, Brazil winning gold is not such a bad thing either.
All right, the penultimate question, and I've got to ask about it because it is what most people are talking about. Reluctantly, though, I ask Hope and Hope Solo's comments. Are we blowing this out of proportion? It's just dystopian hope.
Yeah, I mean, the whole situation is nonsense. Of course, I mean, you've got Hope Solo, who, those of us who followed the team for years now, kind of, as you say, we sort of know what she is. Like, she's a great goalkeeper, but doesn't seem like an especially great human being. But there are countless examples of the exact same happening in other sports, in men's sports. I mean, you don't have to look too far to find someone who is a scumbag in real life, but gets the benefit of the doubt because they can throw a ball, kick a ball, swing a stick, like whatever the case may be. Patrick Kane, he's a real hero, isn't he? Just to pick one example off the top of my head.
Be careful. You're gonna get the PK and fanboys are gonna come after you now.
No, they can eat it. I don't care. But that's my point. Why are there fan? I don't. It's weird in that when junk like this happens in the NHL or the NFL or whatever, you get people who tend to double down, right, and say, I'm a Blackhawks fan, so obviously the fact that Patrick Kane is a dirtbag is a personal affront to me, and so I'm going to be especially obstinate in defending him because people pointing out his bad character reflects badly on me, so I need to defend him. But it's weird because Solo has kind of been hung out to dry in this case. I haven't really seen any American soccer fans or pundits or commentators trying to find that silver lining or obstinately defending her. And I'm not making it into a gender thing. It's just, it's maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it's up to every individual to decide what their motivations for doing what they do is. All I'm saying is that, it's fascinating to watch. All of a sudden, people are angry at Hope Solo for having the attitude and approach that she does because the U.S. lost. Turning a blind eye was fine when, the team won everything, but all of a sudden they lose a game and oh, well, now her, unsporting remarks are suddenly a big deal. I mean, it's kind of the reverse of what I was saying with Sinclair earlier on, right? Is that, all of us are going to form our own judgments of strangers that we've either never met or maybe, those of us who cover the game, maybe we've stuck a microphone in their face for 5 minutes, but we don't know any of these people, right? We're going to come to our own conclusions, but it's what you do on the field that ultimately, is going to determine whether or not you get a contract with a team and whether you get to continue your career as a professional athlete, And so I don't think these comments are going to curtail Solo's career. I mean, she's gonna keep getting the start for the U.S. women's national team until she says she doesn't want to anymore, and I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. I mean, is it idiotic to call a team that played a perfectly strategic knockout game in the Olympics cowards? Yeah, it's moronic. It would seem to reveal kind of an ignorance of what teams do in the real world, which is try to win games without necessarily playing pretty. But at the same time, is it difficult to formulate the right words when you've got a live television microphone or a reporter's recording device in your face? Absolutely it is. I mean, heck, I knew I was going to be recording this podcast with you guys, and I do this all the time, and I'm still stumbling over my words trying to figure out what the hell I'm talking about. And I didn't just lose, an Olympic quarterfinal. So, I mean, that's not to absolve Solo of anything. I mean, I think it was a dumb thing to say, and I think that her character has been revealed in various ways over the years. But at the same time, the pearl clutching about it from some of the soccer punditocracy has also been a bit much. But luckily, we can all move on with the tournament now and not have to worry about what the American team is going to do. We're going to crown a new Olympic champion, and all will be right with the world.
There you go. Real quickly, Daniel, the glove thing. You're a referee. Would you have permitted something like that?
Well, I mean, it's one of those situations that falls into bit of a gray area in that, there's nothing specifically in the laws of the game when you're taking kicks from the penalty mark, as they're called in the laws of the game, that specifically addresses, whether or not a keeper can kill time by, drinking water or changing their gloves or whatever the case may be. You look back to what are normal reasons for receiving a yellow card, and, you've got unsporting behavior, which I think it fits the description of; delaying the restart of play, which I think it fits the description of, even leaving the field to play without the referee's permission. Theoretically, you could fit it under that too. But then there's the whole, as far as I know, you can give a yellow card in a penalty shootout. Anyway, it's gamesmanship or gameswomanship, I guess. It's something that Solo has done before. It's kind of greasy, but, I hate to say this as a referee, because I'm all about respect for the refs and everything like that. But you work with what the ref gives you, right? Worst case scenario there, she would have gotten a yellow card, and she still caused the delay. She still managed to ice the kicker. Unfortunately, there's no recourse for the referee in that scenario. And a player like that is going to try to do those sorts of things and get away with it. She got away with it, but ultimately didn't save the shot. So didn't work that well for her. But yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely one that the IFAB needs to consider for their next laws of the game adjustment, and they can call it the Solo rule.
There you go. Final question, Daniel. Can you articulate in any real way
No, I can't.
What a Canadian gold medal would mean for the sport in this country? Let's dream a little bit. Obviously, it would be the biggest moment in the sport. You can look at the men winning the Gold Cup. You can look at the men qualifying for the World Cup. Those are both huge moments, but that would surpass it, obviously. What would it mean?
Well, I mean, now that I heard the remainder of your question, asking me if I could articulate it, I mean, the answer remains no, I can't. I mean, when Diana Matheson scored the goal to win the bronze medal in 2012, you would think, and I would have thought, that I'd be hitting the roof, or the ceiling. It'd be weird to hit the roof because you have to go out the window and come back down, hit the ceiling with celebration. But I honestly just kind of stared at the screen, dumbstruck, kind of not quite understanding what I had just seen. The players running on the field, and Luke Wildman yelling about it. And I gotta say, this apropos of not much, credit to Luke Wildman on the day who was announcing the game for Matheson scores. I think it's the last kick of the game. There's 10 seconds left in stoppage time. This is going to be the winner. France is not going to have time to come down and score, unless a bolt of lightning hits the ref and she gets confused. But in that moment, Wildman still has the wherewithal to say, not that's the goal that wins the, and you'll hear this if you go back and listen to it, not that's the goal that wins the bronze. He says, is that the goal that wins the bronze medal for Canada? Of course it is, but he'd been in Canadian soccer long enough to know there's something might still go, like, even in that moment. So credit to Luke in the moment, and preemptive credit to Nigel Reid, who I'm sure will have some marvelous calls for us in Canada's next 2 games as well. Both British accents, both great guys. I'm not making fun of them, but both British accents. There you go. What would it's honestly impossible to calculate. I mean, to see the growth of the program from 2012 to now, to think what would happen there if the team wins a gold medal is just remarkable. I mean, I remember going to a quote unquote viewing party during the 2011 Women's World Cup, which was a year before London, of course. And I don't want quote unquote viewing party. Like, I was someone that helped organize it, along with a former colleague of ours, Ben Rycroft, Duane, and it was us and a fellow who was working for Umbro Canada at the time, who brought some swag to hand out, and we did the best we could to promote it and tell people to come out. Nah, it was us. And because there was the women's national team was not on the radar, I mean, Sinclair scored that goal against Germany in that game, and that was the first time that most people had ever heard of her. But it was just kind of a quick curiosity. Oh, there's something you see on the highlight reel. Oh, whatever, Christy Soclair, whatever, some women's soccer player. So it in terms of the attention for the team and the narratives and everything like that, a gold medal would be astounding, but ultimately it's all for naught if it does, going forward, if the muskeg underlying that top level success does not continue. I know muskeg doesn't change. That was a bad analogy, but the point is, you look at what's happening at the grassroots level, moving in the right direction, that sense of nationwide standards, that long-term player development, all of these things. It is a great thing in and of itself. Like, winning Olympic gold, regardless of what happens afterwards, is great, because it's the point, right? Like, it's the reason that we emotionally invest in watching the national team play, is to see them qualify for World Cups, get into the Olympics, win medals. And so, in complete isolation, it would be an amazing moment, even if it's not replicated. But in order for it to have some kind of long-term impact for the sport of soccer, I think that it needs to not overshadow or not undermine things that are currently going on and changes that are being made. I just worry whether people in the Canadian soccer community might look at it and say, like, well, look, things are perfect now. Like, the system we've been using to this point produced a gold medal winning women's national team. So no, we don't need to change. Like, let's go back to the way things were. And I think that if we have any hope of replicating this kind of success in the decades to come, then we sort of need to keep moving in that same direction. So gold medal would be astonishing, would create a generation of role models for young soccer players in this country, which would be great. I just hope that the systems also remain in place so that those young players receiving that inspiration have a realistic chance of following in those footsteps.
All right. At least if Canada does score a goal to win a medal this time, we know that Kaylin Kyle won't arguably be offside because she's in Portugal. So there you go.
Oh,
all right,
okay. Yeah.
Exactly. She was offside, Ed.
No, well, I've said this before, another, not only Luke Wildman's commentary, but another underrated element. People make fun of Kaylin Kyle and, professional athlete, like, as long as you're not being mean, like, whatever. But she had a big part in that goal too, because she was in an offside position, indisputably. But she also had the wherewithal to realize, oh, dang, I'm offside. If I try to direct this ball in or touch it or do whatever, it's not going to count. So she dives out of the way to show the referee, like, nope, I'm just hanging out here. I'm not going to touch this ball. Like, had she touched that goal doesn't stand, and she's a villain. As it is, she moves out of the way, has the right instinct in the right moment, and is this underrated Canadian hero. So whatever her national team career may or may not involve from this point on, Kaylin Kyle indisputably had a big role to play in that bronze medal winning goal.
Kaylin Kyle's an Olympian and a medalist at that. All right, Daniel, we thank you for your time. It was a long time today. I hope people enjoyed that. We'll say goodbye now. Kevin and I will come back after a quick break to wrap the show up with a little bit of Premier League talk, maybe a little bit of MLS talk.
All right. Well, thanks as always for having me, guys, and hopefully next time.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And we're back. Thanks again to Daniel. Always informative, always entertaining is Daniel, and a passionate Canadian soccer supporter at that. Seen as there's very few people in this country, Kevin, that have seen the women play as much as Daniel.
Exactly, Duane. And it's going to be quite a day tomorrow. Canada, Germany, quarterfinals, Brazil, Australia on the other side.
And I know here in Toronto, to pump it one more time, if you're listening to the Toronto area, there will be another viewing party at Scallywags. It's during the workday, so it probably won't be packed to the gills. However, we do encourage people to go out and support it with like-minded people. 3 o'clock, I'll be there at Scally's. They have great food at Scally's too. It's a really great restaurant there. So go grab yourself a late lunch. Maybe you play hooky from work and enjoy that. Enjoy the day and enjoy Canada's attempt to win a silver medal at the very least if they were to win that game. Look, quickly to wrap up that conversation, it is a tough ask, but this is a team that has had a lot of tough asks this tournament so far. So I am frighteningly positive heading into this one, because usually I'm the one trying to throw the wet blanket on stuff, and I'm not doing that this time because this team continues to confound and to prove doubters wrong at this tournament. And what's one more win? And I do think that if they do win, I think it's going to probably be late. I think it's probably going to be stoppage time. I can't see them winning a blowout here. I think it'll be 1-0, Kevin, but I give them a chance.
There's always a chance. It's going to be a different Germany. It's not going to be necessarily as easy for Canada. The 10 credit performance, will they be able to replicable in a probably super sub type of situation? It is going to be a different game with different lineup and different results. How Canada goes from there, that's the interesting part. Do they go to the bronze medal game or do they take the advantage of the situation with the Americans being out, having Germany here? It's going to be like the advantage of Americans being out. It's only going to be in the final if you get there, because they have a chance to beat those two teams on the other side. So their final is right now. So if they get a chance to squeeze by Germany, any means possible, even if they had to play in a quote unquote cowardly fashion, I'll take it in any day, because at the end of the day, it's the win or no. So that's all that it's going to take. And the 1-0 is a result that I could potentially see happening.
Yeah. I think the key is to go in looking to win the silver and not thinking, Sweden's an easier touch for bronze, because obviously lots can happen, and I don't think they do that. They've been playing every game to win so far, so obviously they're going to go out to play this one to win too. All right, we're going to move on now and wrap the show up with just a tiny little bit of Premier League talk. Now, normally moving forward once the Olympics are done, and our focus is entirely on the Olympics right now, folks, because we're doing a live show every day on the Olympics. It takes a lot of research to do it well. It is difficult to keep both of these up, but we're trying to get out there with the material for you nonetheless. So we're going to just quickly go through it and talk this. We'll come up with a format moving forward to really delve into the Premiership Premier League, going forward. We don't know quite what that format's going to look like, but certainly it will be a major focus of our coverage, and we are going to focus more on the Premier League than we will on the other big European leagues, but we're not going to ignore them. We're probably going to bring specialists in to talk about them here and there, and Kevin and I will do more consistent coverage. And that's just simply a numbers thing. It is a popular league. It is a massively popular league, and that's the reality of it, right?
Exactly. So let's dive into it, Duane. In famous words of someone very closely by watching it over the years, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And apparently, Hull City are going to win the league this year.
No, they're not. But Look, that was the start of the weekend, of course, and it was a big slap, a slap back to reality for Leicester City fans, I assume, and everyone just thinks they're going to. No one's picking them to repeat. I think based on that result, and teams have had what Leicester did so well last year is that they had a game plan and they executed, and I don't think teams took them seriously until it was too late. They didn't plan for them. You have a team in Hull that's going in and is going to obviously be playing the role of the underdog in this game and was able to take advantage of that. Like Leicester got a lot of points early playing games like teams against Hull and getting, Hull obviously wasn't there, but you know what I mean, playing teams at that level and getting results without much of effort last year. It's not going to be the same this year, and I think that most people point to that as the main reason why it's hard to see Leicester replicated. I do think they're going to finish top half of the table, and I do think also Leicester will challenge for Europa this year. I'm just not sure they're going to have enough in them to replicate anything close to what they did last year, top four. I also think part of that is City is different, United is different, Chelsea is different. Like those top teams it was a perfect storm last year for Leicester. They were the best team. They were deserving. Don't get me wrong, but all those top teams I just listed, including Liverpool, all were doing something weird. Like it was a weird season last year, and I can't see that happening again.
Well, just the fact that Chelsea crashed out, the defending champions last year, we explained the situation. It was a fluke season. This year, things will be much more back to reality. Outside of Arsenal, maybe not even being in the top four, if we take week one as an example, Liverpool with a great victory at Anfield, 4-3. Chelsea playing on Monday in the afternoon in the Monday Night Football against West Ham, a kind of derby to start the season for both clubs. West Ham in the Olympic Park for their first season. We'll see how that unfolds. Man United decided to start the season with a bang, and Zlatan decided to be Zlatan off the bat.
For 2 minutes, but that's what Zlatan is. He's going to float in and out of games and have moments of magic. And it's especially going to be what's the key for Zlatan. And what I think he's going to make the biggest impact for United this year is against teams like Bournemouth, because he has that ability to sort of float in and out of a game. I've drawn the comparison to Yaya Toure to him. And I don't mean directly in terms of playing style, just how Yaya Toure kind of floated in and out of games for a lot of the last few seasons. And last year he was out of them a lot more than he was in them. And that was a big part of City's problems. But Zlatan, I think, is going to do the same thing. He might be invisible for 80 minutes, but if he's visible for 30 seconds and that happens to be a moment of magic, it's hard for clubs like Bournemouth, like Burnley, clubs of that level to hold them off for the entire 90. And that's going to be a major difference if they can rack up those points against those lesser teams. And United's famous for that. They've won titles before by basically sweeping the series against everyone below them and just doing enough against the teams around them. So that's probably what his biggest contribution is. The game I focused on to move past United.
I was going to say, speaking of just doing enough, Man City versus Sunderland.
Yeah, 3 points is 3 points, and that's got to be what you look at this point. It wasn't. Look, we asked Christian on last week, and I asked him this. I said, I think people are putting too much stock in Pep instantly turning this around. And what I saw I'm being a typical pessimist blue here. What I saw on Saturday was a team that was having the same problems they had last year. They could not break them down. They had a lot of the ball. That's his style. They were working very patiently, and they looked impressive at times. They got the early penalty, nice little run there, and managed to draw it. And Aguero finished it as he does. He's pretty clinical from the spot. So they got that lead 5 minutes in, and then it was just a vision and frustration until, and eventually Defoe, who continues to do magical things and is the perfect striker for teams like Sunderland. He's no Canadians there to scare him, so that's fine. The Navas cross, and I was happy to see Navas. If I could put my blue hat on for a second, I was happy to see Navas get another run out with him. Most people assumed he'd be gone under Pep, and for him to start was a bit surprising. And he had a good game, and he's a bit of a strange player. He looks decent at times, but his crossing ability was just off the charts last year in terms of the bad way. So it was nice for him to get that cross in early and give you a little hope. And I remember I was reminded of Nasri under Pellegrini. He was nowhere under Mancini, right? And then the new manager came in, it refreshed him, and he was able to really play a contributing role for City in that second title in 2014. Nasri was it. And I wonder whether Navas might not be the same way under Pep. Just some thoughts there. Anything else jump out at you in that first week, Kevin?
Well, we'll see the result today of Chelsea-West Ham to see how the Conte era starts in Stamford Bridge. But outside of that, the results were West Brom against Crystal Palace, two teams that will be battling in the 10 to 15, if not relegation battle. Everton, Tottenham, 1-1. Surprising result for Everton. It was at home, but Tottenham doesn't really start the season the way they would like. It's not going to be necessarily an easy season for Tottenham because of the turnaround with the Euro. A lot of their players played for England. The turnaround is going to be quite difficult to get points early in the season. We'll see how that affects. Maybe that had something to do with the Everton draw. But outside of that, no, it's pretty much across the board, a lot of draws in the first week.
Well, yeah, we'd be remiss not to mention the one that most certainly was not to draw. Of course, Liverpool 4, Arsenal 3.
Yes, exactly.
And you mentioned European having impact. I think Arsenal was a little impacted, but that Arsenal continues to confound people. I actually picked them to win the title this year because I just had a hunch about them, but maybe my hunch was completely off base. They're going to go one way or the other. They always do. People look at them as having such a horrible season last year. They finished second. So that's,
exactly. They were battling for the push. If it wasn't for Leicester, they might have won everything.
Yeah, and Liverpool is going to be, I think what we saw the other day is the Klopp experiment is starting to take shape, but it's not completely finished yet. And I think Liverpool is going to look a lot like the Liverpool team that chased City for the title in 2014 now, in the sense that they're going to score a lot of goals, but they're going to allow a lot of goals too. So they're going to be very exciting to watch this year and probably finish 4th, 5th, 6th, somewhere like that, but be quite entertaining in doing it. So that's kind of the Premier League talk there, Kevin. Look, I think on that note, we'll probably wrap at this point for today. MLS, we're going to do the Canadian review in tomorrow's show. Any final thoughts?
No, exactly. The Canadian review will be on tomorrow's show. The tomorrow show will be a little bit later as well. So late afternoon, early evening, you will have Soccer Today previewed. So not previewed, but before 5 Rings Daily. So 5 Rings Daily followed by Soccer Today tomorrow, late afternoon, early evening.
When hopefully we will be talking about a big victory for Canada in the semifinals of the Olympic tournament. But we'll see. Lots to happen before then. We'll obviously break it down one way or the other. But until that time, Kevin, as always, say goodbye.
Until tomorrow, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.